Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another morning meditation. We are on week 8. I did some math the other day, also known as I looked at our YouTube history, and I saw we are on week 8 of quarantine. That is crazy. Welcome. Thank you for enduring this with us. We've had a great time bringing these morning meditations to you. And as long as we're in quarantine, we're going to keep doing it. So today we're going to be in Psalm 34. Yesterday, Peter introduced us into this new series we're going through the book of Psalms with Psalm 27. So today we'll be in Psalm 34. So if you have a Bible in front of you, a physical one, go ahead and grab it. Feel free to turn there. In other words, if you're on a computer, feel free to open up a new tab and pull up your Bible there. If you're trying to find Psalm 34, it is right after Psalm 33. It's right before Psalm 35, in case that helps. I know it's a bad joke, but I had to say it. So while you guys are turning to Psalm 34, go ahead, say hello in the comments so that we can see you're here. We got the app working up and again on the computer, but again, it no longer lets us know who is logging on. So you have to say hello to let us know you are watching. So good morning, Linda and Cindy, Fran, Mark and Sydney. Welcome. As you're commenting, letting us know you're here, let us know what is the best book outside of the Bible that you have read lately. So I typically love reading, but since I started going back to school to get my master's, I've done so much reading for school, I haven't had much time to read for myself. But I have a couple weeks coming up here between classes where I'm hoping to get some reading in. So let me know what are some of your favorite books that you've read outside of the Bible. They can be fiction, they can be nonfiction. I read everything. Personally, since high school, my favorite author has been an author named Terry Brooks. He writes sci-fi fantasy. I've loved his books since probably I was 15 or 16. I'm a few books behind, so unless I get some good recommendations, that's probably what I'll catch up on. But again, say hi. Let us know you're watching. Good morning, Olmans. Good morning, Deb. So let us know you're watching and let me know what books would you recommend that I read between my classes these coming weeks. Undaunted. I am not familiar with that. I'll have to look into it. Um, so as I mentioned, we're going to be jumping into Psalm 34. I'll keep checking the chat. I'll keep saying hello as I see new people logging on and giving me their book recommendations. But we're going to jump to Psalm 34. I'm going to read the full passage. It's 22 verses, but it's a pretty quick read. Normally in Trinity, we teach out of the CSB, the Christian Standard Bible. Personally, I typically read out of the New American Standard Bible. And all these are different English words to say the core teaching. So in some it might say thy will be done in Lord's Prayer, others will say your will be done, others might say God's will be done. So whatever translation you use, it's probably a pretty good one. But today I'm going to be reading out of the English Standard Bible because that's just what I happen to have on my desk here. So we're going to be reading Psalm 34. We're then kind of going to be looking at the context around the song. Good morning, Brad. Fun fact: so on this typical topic of books, Mary texted me on Friday asking if I was listening to Andy Serkis read The Hobbit, and I didn't see that until I finished yard work, and I totally missed it, and I was super sad because I also love Tolkien. All right, Pastor Steve can tell you about it. Awesome. So I was sad I missed Andy Serkis reading The Hobbit. So hopefully that is recorded and I can buy it somewhere. So we're going to start here in Psalm 34. As I said, I'm just going to read the entire passage, and then we're going to kind of look at the context that the psalm was written out of, and then we're going to kind of break down the psalm and see where David was at and how this kind of preaches where he was through those circumstances and how we can trust God in the midst of trying times, whether that be a pursuit of an enemy or trying to remain safe from a disease, whatever that may look like for us. So let me go ahead here and read Psalm 34, verses 1 through 22. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let my humble hear and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and delivered me from all my fears. Those who look at him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed. The poor man cried, and the Lord heard him, and saved him out of his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and deliver him. O taste and see, the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. O fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, O children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. What man is there who desires life, and loves many days that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil, and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn away from evil, and do good. Seek peace, and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are towards the righteous, and his ears towards their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the memory of them from the earth. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and saves the crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him of them all. He keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken. Affliction will slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be condemned. The Lord redeems the life of his servants. None of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. All right, that was Psalm 34, 1 through 22. Good morning, Marsha. Good to be seeing you. So before we jump into the psalm, I like to ask when I'm reading the psalms, whenever possible, what was happening in the psalmist's life that led them to write this psalm? Now, a lot of the psalms were written by David, a few were written by some other people, but especially the ones of David, we can kind of track where he was in his life. Where was he in this journey of shepherd to king when this was written? What events kind of worked together for him to have these insights? And so a lot of our Bibles, before this chapter starts, it'll say something like, from David when he changed his behavior before Abimelech. And so I started wondering, who was Abimelech, and when did David change his behavior? So I did a quick search. I have my ESV study Bible out here because I was using it for study notes. And a lot of people agree that this is happening in 1 Samuel 21. So some of you may be familiar with the story from 1 Samuel 20, where David is really good friends with Jonathan, the son of King Saul. And David is frightened for his life. Saul has already made an attempt on his life once. He tells Jonathan that he's afraid that Saul is going to try to kill him again. Jonathan's like, no, my dad's awesome. He wouldn't do that. But they kind of work this plan together to figure out if King Saul is trying to kill King David. Jonathan discovers, yes, Saul does harbor anger against David. So using some fancy archery, Jonathan signals to David that he should flee, that he should escape the kingdom for the time being, so that King Saul does not try to kill him. And so David flees. In 1 Samuel 21, we see him stop by a temple in a neighboring city where he's given holy bread as well as the sword of Goliath, which David had killed a few chapters earlier. And so David is walking around. He's got 5 loaves of holy bread. He's got Goliath's sword, which, if we recall, is pretty big, so it's probably strapped to his back. And he heads to Gath. So I'm like, okay, so what and where is Gath? So I started doing some research on Gath. Gath is a city of the Philistines, which you may recall Goliath was a Philistine. So digging deeper, we learn that Goliath, not only is he just Goliath the giant, but he's Goliath the giant from Gath. That's a lot of G's going on there. So David is walking into Gath with the sword of their former champion, presumably strapped to his back. They recognize David, rightfully, and they're like, isn't this the king of the land? The people are going to the king of Gath, and they're saying, isn't this David, the king of the land? Didn't they say Saul has killed his hundreds, but David's his thousands? So David gets rightfully word. He's brought before the king of Gath. And this is the people, a lot of people believe he's referring to as Abimelech here. In 1 Samuel 21, 13 through 15, it says, so he being David, this is when David's brought before the king of Gath, so he changed his behavior before them and pretended to be insane in their hands. He made marks on the doors of the gate and let spittle run down his beard. Then Achmesh, this guy, uh, said to his servants, "Behold, you see this man is mad. Then why have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen that you have brought this fellow to behave as a madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house?" So, kind of that gives us some of the context that led into David writing this psalm. David fled from where he had been staying. He fled from serving the king of Israel. He is uh, essentially fleeing for his life to a former enemy. He flees to the Philistines, people who are enemies of the people of God, people who they've done battle with, people who he kind of liberated Israel from their oppression temporarily when Goliath was challenging them. But while he's there, he starts fearing for his life from this new enemy who was an old enemy. And so he figures, how best can I escape their cruelty? I'm just going to act like I'm insane. So he starts drooling down his beard, scratching things, making odd marks on doors and posts. And I just love the king's reaction where he's like, "Do I lack madmen? Like, are there not enough crazy people around me?" Um, if you're a parent, you've probably had that sentiment at some point watching your kids. I was a kid once. I could have been mistaken for an insane person. Um, I just love that idea that David, out of this sheer panic, flees, and out of this renewed panic, he acts insane. And in this process of being turned from the king, saying, "I don't need another madman," David is released from that danger. And in that, he pins those words, "I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all of my fears." The poor man cried, the Lord heard him and saved him out of all of his troubles. Like, those are words of a man who saw real danger, but instead experienced peace. They're the words of a man who was threatened, but instead he found comfort. So David was rightfully worried, rightfully feared for his life, yet God provided for him. He does not take credit of, "Oh yeah, I was smart. I thought I'd been insane." Like, he credits that to God delivering him from his fears. He credits that to God saving him from his troubles. That kind of struck me. I started thinking about issues where maybe I had a good thought or I had a clever idea and I took credit for it. Or maybe it was really God saying, "Hey, Brian, why don't you do this or that?" Before I started pursuing seminary, before I was working with Trinity in ministry, I was a graphic designer for the last 6, 7 years. And there were many times where I was trying to think of a clever design for one of the clients. And maybe I'm wrapping a semi, maybe I'm making a new logo, maybe we're rebranding an entire storefront. And I was at a loss. I didn't know what to do. And I would just pray, you know what, God, give me some creative insight. God is super creative. Like, just look at the world around us. Look, we're in spring. Look at the trees as they're budding. Look at the flowers as they're blooming. Like, God is a creative God. Uh, so I would just say, "Hey, you know what, God, give me some of that creativity. Give me some of that insight." And sure enough, eventually I'd come up with an idea, a design that the clients loved. And far too often I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm pretty creative. I'm pretty good at this thing." But in reality, it was God giving me those insights. We have a lot of engineers in our church who they've shared those same stories with me. They were working on some challenge at work. A lot of John Deere employees maybe trying to find a new hitch assembly or a new wiring harness. They're trying to find ways to solve issues, so they just took it to God. Like, "God, you designed a world that runs on these scientific principles. Like, give me some of that insight. Help me understand how to design a better tractor." God fulfilled. And so often we can take credit for those areas of God helping us. But here, David sets this example of he escapes from first Saul and now Ashish, whoever this king of Gash is, um, and he credits that to God. God delivered me from my enemies. God saved me from my troubles. I was kind of thinking about that. Like, next time you do something, are you taking the credit for it, or are you rightfully giving that credit back to God? It says God holds us together. He knit us in our creation. Like, we can't do anything apart from Him. So anytime we do anything well, regardless of if we went to Him in prayer beforehand or not, like, He's the one who provided us the means to do that. David's mindset in this psalm is one of humility. It's a mindset of peace, a man who has recognized he is surviving not by the skin of his teeth, but rather by the provision of God's grace. Brief aside, like, do teeth have skin? Where does that saying come from? Skin of your teeth? I don't know. But David is not surviving by the skin of his teeth, but rather by the provision of God's grace. So when we face those struggles, those trials, those temptations, those difficulties, do we try to endure under our own strength? Or do we turn and lean into and start to rely on God for his provision? David writes, this is one of my favorite lines of the psalm: "O taste and see the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him." I'm not going to lead us in a song because you don't want to hear me sing. But as I was reading and meditating on that this week, the song says, "The name of the Lord is a strong tower." I believe the song is actually quoting a psalm, and the righteous run into it and they are saved. Just that idea that, like, are we running into the refuge of the Lord? He is this strong tower. He is this fortification that will keep us protected. Have you tasted the goodness of the Lord? Have you seen his greatness? I would love to hear how. I'd love to hear how you have tasted that the Lord is good. How have you turned and taken refuge in him? If you want, you can comment now. We'd love to see those things. I'm keeping an eye on the comments. Good morning. Mary is with us now as well. Pat Simmons, welcome, Pat. But let us know, how have you tasted the Lord's goodness? How have you seen his greatness? How have you taken refuge in him? If you're not watching this live, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook later in the day, you can keep commenting. I get notifications every time anyone comments, likes, or anything, and I go and I check it out. You can email me, you can message me. I would just love to hear that. I would just love to keep each other encouraged. How have we tasted the Lord's goodness? How have we taken our refuge in him? But we see here a conditional promise. Now, if you're a parent, you're familiar with conditional promises. If you're a child, you're familiar with conditional promises. So a great example is, if you finish your chores, we will get ice cream. Unless said chores are completed, there is no rightful claim on ice cream. So if I don't clean my room, I'm not going to get a popsicle, or even better yet, 4 queens, right? Like, you have to do the condition to get the blessing. So here, David is writing, "Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him." So if you read the context, it's saying, blessed is the person who takes refuge in God, in the Lord. Are we taking refuge in God? Are we finding our rest, our release in the Lord? Or am I trying to operate under my own power, my own endurance? We can't complain that God is withholding his blessing if we're not taking our refuge in him. We can't complain that God is not revealing himself to us if we are not seeking him first. Does your soul boast in the Lord, or do you boast in your ability, your creativity, your ingenuitivity, your ability to decipher things? Are you exalting, praising his name, or are you seeking the exaltation and praise of your name? Unless we're taking our refuge in him, unless he is our guidepost, unless God is that which we seek, we're not fulfilling our end of that. We're not doing our chores. So we can't complain when we don't see that blessing. So we need to turn to him. We need to say, God, I give up. I don't remember how long ago it was, there was a song on pop radio, "Jesus Take the Wheel." I don't know if you guys remember this. But I started thinking about that, and I'm like, that's not what Jesus wants. Jesus doesn't want to take the wheel. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad song. It's just not my genre of choice. But what I'm saying is, Jesus doesn't want to take the wheel. Jesus wants to take the pink slip. He wants to take the title. He wants to take the deed. He's not content being your chauffeur. He wants to own the car that you're driving. When I thought about that, I'm like, how different is that from him being the one in charge to him being our chauffeur, taking us from place to place? Like, God should be the boss, not us bossing him. Which, growing up, I think that's the mentality I had. I was trying to use him to reach my ends, and spoiler alert, that doesn't work. God is greater than our attempts. I'm going to jump over the chat here, see what we have. God provided for every need since your stroke. Oh, that's awesome. You've never wanted for a need. His goodness has been sweet since turning back to him. right before the stroke. In him, he has done lots um, singing his praises, for without him I am nothing but a broken body. That is awesome. Like, yeah, God is greater than medical ailments. I was shared a story recently about a woman who used to be in our church. This was years ago. She passed away recently, um, and she had been diagnosed with cancer from a doctor who's very trusted. It's the same doctor who had diagnosed my mom many years ago. But this was before then even. But then when they went to do surgery, it was gone. And there are two amazing trusted doctors, and they're like, we're looking at the X-rays, like the cancer's right here, but it's not there. But the church had prayed. The church gathered together and prayed, and she was healed. God can do great things in the midst of medical ailments. God can take us after strokes and say, you know what? No, I'm gonna be a blessing. I'm gonna work through that so people can see me in you. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Fran. Um, so David then continues on in this psalm. In verse 9, he starts, "O fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, O children, listen to me. I teach you the fear of the Lord." I have far too often said, I fear the Lord with my lips. I'll say, I am awed by the Lord. I rely on the Lord. I'll say that outwardly. I'll express it with my lips. But then when you look at my actions, when you look at how I behave, you're like, it doesn't seem like your actions are aligning with what you say. And every time I try that, I fall flat on my face. Um, it's like you're like, I'm going to fly to England in my plane. And then you sit in a folding chair. Like, a folding chair is not a plane. Our abilities are not God's. We need to truly rely on Him. Just saying we do does not make it so. So we need to turn and rely on God authentically. Lean not on our own understanding. We end up finding our shortcomings and weaknesses. So that idea, fear the Lord, His saints, for those who fear Him have no lack. And you find a lot of people who argue over the meaning of fear. I'm like, you know what? Why don't I pick all of them? Why don't I revere him? Why don't I be awed by him? But why don't I remember he also is the final say in judgment? So I want to make sure that I am serving him well out of love and reverence, but also because you know what? There is something I don't want to experience after death, right? So why not just pick all of them? Play it safe. Cover your bases. Um, and then in verse 12, David continues, "What man is there who desires life and loves many days, that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil, your lips from speaking deceit. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are towards the righteous. His ears are towards their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the memory of them from the earth. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of their troubles." This is one of like the wrecking ball parts of this passage where it just floors me, and I'm like, can I just ignore this stanza? Like, I don't like this one. What man is there who desires life and loves his days, that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil, your lips from deceit. Essentially, don't badmouth the other guy. Whether he's a politician, another church, a coworker, a neighbor, an enemy, don't don't speak evil. Uh, don't speak deceit. Turn away from evil. Do good. Seek peace and pursue it. Am I seeking peace or am I seeking division? Am I pursuing unification or am I causing dissension? So I was actually writing a message to a friend of mine just the other day. I love data. I don't know why. I was digging through some COVID data and I got on a list where it sends me these charts, and you can see essentially a 2 week gap. So Germany, they started putting on some restrictions. 2 weeks later, they saw a massive decrease in their COVID cases. Like, all right, our R value is less than 1. If you care what that means, Google it. Like, we can start releasing our thing. So they started reopening stores, reopening events, and all of a sudden Germany is back on an upswing. They're entering their second peak now. The R is over one, meaning more and more people are getting caught with it. So I was writing a comment about that on a friend of mine's wall, and I said, you know what? Am I seeking peace, or am I going to cause dissension? If I post this, will I cause people to look into and dig into the data, or will I cause an argument? And I realized that wasn't peaceful. So I just chose not to post it. I sent a private message to that person. I said, hey, here's some interesting data. I thought, what are your thoughts? We had a nice, calm discourse because it was me and another vested person. I avoided the fight that could have broken out. And that's really difficult, I think, for a lot of us. We want to share what we think to be true before we do adequate research, before we think too much. Um, Growing up, I had far too many fights. This is one of those like sad nerd confessions about Marvel versus DC. Like friendships were brought to the brink because my friends, for some reason, thought DC was better than Marvel. I still don't know what was wrong with them. I've prayed for their healing, and I think they're coming around. But like we can fight over the stupidest things. But I love how David says, like, are we pursuing peace? God wants us to pursue peace. We do not neglect biblical truth. We hold firm to biblical truth. We don't back down on that. God says something is a sin. We don't change because of culture. We say, no. God says it's a sin, so it's a sin. If God says something is righteous, then it's righteous. Um, but are we pursuing peace among those secondary, those tertiary things, or are we causing dissension? Worship style preference. In my perfect world, all worship has bagpipes. No one else agrees with me, apparently. Uh, but kind of that idea of, I'm willing to submit that worship style for the sake of everyone else in the world. Um, but David goes on, he mentions his brokenheartedness, how he's been crushed and his afflictions are many, but God delivers him. And I love David's Psalms because we can see where he was in life when he wrote them. But we can also see that in the midst of crisis, in the midst of hardship, far greater than anything we will experience, he turns and relies on God. And David made massive mistakes. You don't have to read too much of David's story to realize that he sinned greatly and he did some stupid things, but still, God says he was a man after his own heart because God is a God who forgives. And God is a God who sees who we are and says, you know what, I love you despite your errors. Come back to me. And that being said, like God doesn't say, I love everyone, everyone's saved. Like God is saying, like, I have a path to salvation and I love you and I want you to take it. But he loves us so much, he won't force it. Previously, I shared a C.S. Lewis quote about how God does not want mere automata or robots, but he wants sons and daughters. And I love how David illustrates that. David made mistakes, but David continually came back to God. Someone may or may not share. There's a psalm that David wrote after he was rebuked heavily and after he had sinned and come back to God. If no one else shares that psalm, maybe that'll become a future morning meditation for us. But I just love seeing David's heart and his reliance on God, not himself. So my challenge for you guys these next couple of days is just watch. When you're about to post something, when you're about to say something, when you're about to do something, think, am I pursuing peace or am I about to cause derision? Am I pursuing righteousness or am I going to cause anger? Now imagine you are driving and you cut someone off or you're honking angrily at someone because they started to swerve into your lane. Now imagine you and that other driver get out of your car at the same time. Are you going to be able to share the gospel with that person? Imagine someone cuts in line in front of you at the grocery store as you're checking out and you just start railing at them and you're like, dude, there's a line. Do you not have patience? And then you find out they're your neighbor. Can you share your gospel? Can you share the gospel with that person? We need to pursue peace because that peace will form the bridge so that we can share gospel truth. We can share the light of Christ. We can share the joy of the kingdom of God with these people. Again, that doesn't mean we become pushovers. That doesn't mean we neglect biblical truth or shy away from what God calls sin. But it means those secondary, tertiary issues, maybe we let it slide. Maybe we let that guy cut us off in traffic. Maybe we let someone in front of us in the grocery store. Maybe you don't honk every time someone gets too close at you, but you simply just back away. But think, how are you pursuing peace this week in the relationships of those people around you? I'm going to go ahead and pray for us here. It's 8 o'clock. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. and the following weeks. I love Psalms. They always encourage me. They're amazing. I've been doing a deep dive into them. My dad did a great study on Psalms a while back, and he sent me his resources, and I'm loving it. It's great. So let me pray for us, and then we can enjoy the rest of our days. God, thank you so much for giving us people like David, people who set an example of relying on you in the midst of trial, in the midst of turmoil, in the midst of difficulty, challenge, and crisis. I pray, Lord, that you help us seek peace, help us pursue just living well with those around us, God. Help us set aside our wants and our desires when they don't matter. God, it doesn't matter my favorite instruments. It doesn't matter if I like it light or dark in a sanctuary, Lord. It matters that we're singing and praising honor to you. It doesn't matter, Lord, if I got cut off on the highway. It doesn't matter if someone cut in front of me in the grocery store. What matters is that I love my neighbors and that I love you, Lord. I pray, God, that you just help us embrace this idea of relying on you. Help us fear you this week. And I pray, God, that like David, we can taste and see that you are good. I think of those in our community, God, that do not yet know you. They do not have that saving reliance in you, Lord. My heart breaks for them. I just pray, God, that you can use us. Let us be your servants in the vineyard, your servants in the harvest field. The harvest is plentiful, the labors are few. Help us see our neighbors, live peacefully among them, but live as people who have something else. Help them look to us and say, how do they have peace in this chaos? They're serving well, they're loving well, but they're not panicking. Help them see us as people who rely on something greater than ourselves. And Lord, I just pray continually for wisdom, for knowledge, as we're trying to mitigate and navigate this crisis, Lord. I just pray that you give our leadership in our church specifically wisdom and discernment. And I also just pray for health for those in our community, for those in our state, for those in our nation, and for those around the world, Lord. Just continually protect and heal. I just pray these things for your name's sake, Lord. Amen. All right, join us again tomorrow at 7:30 for another morning meditation as we continue walking through the Psalms. I'm so glad you're all here. I love it. I'm growing, I think, so much through these things. And I'd love to hear, too. What are you guys reading? Throw that stuff in the comments. Always, you can reach out, message me, email me, call me. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you very much. Bye.